Emily Miller of the Washington Times with us tonight. And Emily, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Always a pleasure.
You've got a great piece in the Washington Times right now, the Second Amendment at risk in a second term. You know, this is something obviously gun owners in the NRA have been saying for quite some time. And now the president has once again made it clear. He didn't say anything new, but he certainly reiterated his support for very restrictive gun control laws, including bans on firearms that are commonly owned by millions of law-abiding Americans.
That's right. I mean, what the liberals call the assault weapon ban, which is, you know, banning guns because they look scary ban.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, as you heard, you know, I'm sure you talked about this in your show, and Justice Scalia was asked on Sunday on Fox News about, you know, further rulings, and he said there would be. I mean, he pretty much said there would be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's really frightening is the president, who I think we all know is a gun grabber, but, you know, hasn't really had much opportunity to politically. If he is reelected, he will determine probably the next at least one or two justices of the Supreme Court, knowing that, you know, Scalia would then be in the minority. You know, what would they pass? You know, what would they rule on? And most likely it will be, what can you bear, as Scalia said, like, what arms can you bear? You know, he said, Justice Scalia said it was clear the founders said, you know, you have to be able to hand carry it, but, you know, what limits are there to that? And that's what, you know, the Democrats in Congress, who sort of, as I wrote today, couldn't restrain themselves until after the election, even for their own, even to help themselves, in order to push for more gun control after the shooting in Colorado. I mean, it's just, I think it's really just offensive and disgusting when you've got these horrible victims who are also in the hospital, some not even buried yet, and you've got Senator Lautenberg of New Jersey and Congressman McCarthy of New York in front of City Hall yesterday of New York calling for bans on selling large amounts of ammunition through the mail, as if that would have prevented the Colorado tragedy. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Well, you know, and I don't know if you saw the Pew poll that came out yesterday, Emily, suggesting that most Americans feel like you. Less than a third of Americans surveyed thought that, you know, this murderous act in Colorado is indicative of, you know, some larger societal issue, and they view this as the act of a madman. Excuse me while I turn off my phone here. I didn't even realize I had my phone on, Emily.
I never heard you do that before.
My goodness. Well, usually it doesn't happen. You know, and the Pew poll also showed that really there has been absolutely no movement, one way or the other, on Americans' attitudes towards gun control. You know, again, about half of the country thinks that the emphasis should be on protecting the right to keep and bear arms in this Pew poll. About half thought that there should be perhaps a renewed emphasis on gun control laws, but those numbers haven't changed. You know,
right.
And we've seen other surveys, like, you know, the Gallup poll showing the support for gun control continues to drop, while support for the Second Amendment continues to increase. You know, clearly, I think clearly the American people have figured out, or at least a majority of the American people have figured out, that these gun control policies, they don't work. They don't make anybody safer. They don't prevent violent crime, and what they do is they hamstring the law-abiding citizens. That's
right. And in many cases, these gun control policies make it more dangerous for law-abiding citizens. You know, like, I live in Washington, D.C., and you know, most people in this city, it's so hard to get a gun in this city. You know, I think that you're more vulnerable, and especially because you can't carry a gun in D.C., all that does is just empower the bad guys to just walk down the streets and start shooting at people, which happens every day in this city over iPhones. So, but, you know, that's all true, and you know, we've seen in these polls that the shooting has not changed people's perspective on what we should do about gun control, but that doesn't mean the people on the far left are going to listen to the American people. And so you see Lautenberger fighting this week not only for this new bill that he's introduced, which would require only ammunition from a dealer. The dealer would have to go back to keeping a log of every purchase, which was something that we used to do and was eliminated in 1986 because ATF said we don't need this. It doesn't help us in law enforcement. And it would say you have to show a driver's license in order to buy ammunition, so that means nobody can buy it over the Internet anymore. And they said that any dealer who sells over 1,000 rounds to a person will then have to turn that name over to law enforcement, over, I guess, the ATF in this case, who already said we can't use this information. So, I mean, these are just, you know, really hitting average gun owners hard, you know, on the cost and the, you know, convenience ordering at home, not to mention having the government track every single, round you own. It's very scary. And Lautenberg is not stopping there. He's been pushing Harry Reid this week to tack on to the cybersecurity bill, to tack on this amendment, which is what he calls the high-capacity magazine ban, which is what he defines as over 10 rounds, which is ridiculous.
Right.
Standard size. And pushing to get that in. So, even though the American people are saying, we don't believe more gun laws are going to make us any safer. In fact, people in Colorado are going out and buying more guns to make themselves feel safer in the past week. Congress isn't listening, and I think the fear is for in the second term, if you've got this very liberal, wing of the party and a person in the White House who's going to nominate someone to the Supreme Court in that vein, it's a very good chance that the rulings that will come down in the next term will not be in favor of gun owners.
No, absolutely right, Emily. And again, this is why this is such an important election for gun owners. They can't sit this one out. It can't be on the sidelines. You got to be all in.
That's right,
Emily.
I mean, it's.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the thing is with Obama is he's very careful not to say too much on camera because he knows it can be used against him for political ads.
Right.
But, his spokespeople are constantly saying, we would have the assault weapons ban if we could. They said that last week, Jay Carney, if it weren't for this Congress. And by that he means the Republican House. So I think, the House being a Republican and pro-gun hands, and not just Republicans, a lot of Democrats who are, Second Amendment believers, it will stop a lot of this, but you still have to look at the courts and what would happen there.
Absolutely. Hey, Emily, thank you so much for coming on the program. Great talking to you tonight.
My pleasure. Always fun.
Emily Miller joining us from the Washington Times here on Cam & Company.